Okay, we're going to resume our afternoon session, and we're resuming with the policy development block. This is recommended draft policy ARIN 2017-12, require new POC validation upon reassignment. Because it's a recommended policy, I will do a staff introduction to it. This policy is here in recommended state, which means it could be recommended for last call and sent to the Board of Trustees for ratification. So this might be the last time you see this policy. History. It started as ARIN Policy Proposal 247 in October 2017. It advanced to draft policy in November. Advanced to recommended draft policy in March 2018. So the proposal is clear, it solves a well-known problem, it's technically sound, it enables fair and impartial administration of number resources. It has not yet been presented at an ARIN meeting. Policies must be presented in order to go from recommended to last call, but once they are presented, they're gone potentially, unless there's revisions that would send it back here. The AC Shepherds are Chris Tassett and Leif Sawyer. The staff understanding. The draft policy requires that all requests for reallocation or detailed reassignment that will result in the creation of a new POC object be validated by ARIN prior to approving the request. Validation will be accomplished by contacting the new owner by email. If the contacted POC fails to validate, we will reject the request. This is a very big change to current business practices. In addition, Section 3.8 of the draft policy requires staff to formally notify an organization in a simple reassignment, either the organization or address is identical to an existing one, for the purpose of obtaining guidance as to whether to approve it or redirect it to an existing org ID. Staff comments, 1 of 10. The problem statement is vague as to actual reassignment process, which creates the problem. Recommend additional wording for more accurately describes how a POC is created during reassignment. For example, the language could be, during reassignment reallocation, some large ISPs create POCs from their customer order form. This process is automated for many ISPs, and therefore the result of POCs are not validated prior to be created. This unknowingly creates POCs with no idea who is or even who ARIN is at the time of the creation. It can also create multiple POCs per email address, causing the same person to receive multiple POC validation mails each year. The proposed change represents a very significant change to current operations. The largest impact would be on ARIN engineering. It is a major engineering effort, will involve significant testing. The work has been estimated to take at least 6 months for the planning and development work, which does not include testing or interaction with the community. When the work is completed, there will have to be a period of time when ISPs will have to retool their applications that interface with ARIN before this system can be placed in production. At the point when it's placed in production, all current systems developed by ARIN customers will have to be updated in order to continue working with the new states introduced by this policy. The draft policy would not have a direct effect on RSD operations for the processing requests for reallocation and reassignments due to the fact that they are automated. However, there would be a significant increase in customer calls and tickets. A conservative estimate would suggest that at least 50% of the requests would require some type of manual follow-up from within the person receiving the validation email. The increase in interaction with organizations that don't have direct relations would result in the need of additional staffing within the registration services team. One possible improvement in business processes would be if the policy text specified that the org's abuse contact would be put into the reallocation or reassignment record and then the request approved. ARIN would then issue a notification of the proposed new contact, and if the new contact is validated, the new validated contact record would replace the abuse contact on reallocation or reassignment. This change would result in reducing the number of POCs associated with a single email, which would reduce the number of POC validation mails received annually. Today, there are several emails that have multiple POCs associated with it. Here's the numbers, email addresses. We have 465,000 email addresses in our database. 15,000 of them are associated with 5 to 9 POCs. We have 4,000 associated with 10 to 24 points of contact. We have over 1,261 POCs that have greater than, over 1,261 POCs that have greater than 20, I did it again. There are 1,261 emails that are associated with more than 25 points of contact. If this policy is adopted, which eliminates the requirement for annual POC validation for detailed reassignments, that approximately 70% of the existing POC validation load would be eliminated. Networks and who is requiring POC validation, you can see about 4% direct allocation, 5% direct assignment, 14% reallocation, and detailed reassignments are 77% of the networks in WHOIS requiring POC validation. The wording is misleading. The wording in the draft policy, section 3.8, is misleading because a simple reassignment results in a customer identifier versus an org ID. It's not a full org ID. There's no contract information associated with existing reassignment other than street address that could be used for notification. Thus, it does not appear the proposed text was directly implementable. Also note if notification were possible, the or postal address may cause significant problems since this causes us to match postal addresses, and if companies have the same name with multiple locations, this would require manual intervention. Cannot be implemented as written, but could be implemented with significant effort if the proposed 3 Section 8 was removed. No material legal risk to this policy. Resource impact, major. At least 6 months, and extensive testing with the community as well. Okay, AC presentation, and I'll ask Chris Tassett to come up and give it.
Thank you, sir, very much. I always get the easy ones. Whoops, what happened there? Problem statement. Okay, so the nexus for this proposal is that a lot of these POC records are actually created in an automated fashion that doesn't really allow pre-validation before their creation, and that the people associated with the POCs may have no idea even what ARIN is. So as a result, the policy proposal seeks to improve the situation for those who are unwittingly or unintentionally inserted into WHOIS. Another reason for this is to reduce the amount of time and effort that ARIN staff have to spend, and also hope that the overall validation situation will ensure greater cooperation and greater accuracy going forward. So this is the text of the new proposed section 3.7. I will give you a moment to read it. I'm not going to read it out loud. And this is the information that would be sent to the person with the validation request. And the important part to note here is that if the validation is not confirmed within 10 days, then ARIN has to reject the request. John talked about the proposed section 3.8. We actually revised the proposal to drop that, so that's no longer part of the current proposal. Right now we're just trying to keep it simple to the new 3.7 section that you just saw. And rather than repeating the reasons that we didn't do that, you already heard them from John in his presentation. One of the important points to note, though, that part of the challenge with doing something like 3.8 sought to do is that it sort of interposes ARIN down a level in between its customer and its customer's customers, and that's not a place where ARIN believes, or frankly, I, as Shepherd, think they should be. So as a result of that, as I said, the section 3.8 that was originally proposed was dropped. We did consider this alternate proposal to try and reduce the number of email addresses and so on. But I think the reality is that if once this process starts working and people become more careful going forward, that's going to have a big prophylactic effect going forward. In any case, and in terms of the history that you saw up there, this really isn't going to fix that, because we're talking about the first time creation of POC records anyway. So we didn't want to complicate the proposal by adding this piece to it right now. So just as 2017-3 was sort of neat, clean, one piece. We were trying as shepherds to take the same approach here. There's enough work to do on the engineering side that we thought that it would be simpler to just keep this streamlined and simple and digestible. When this was put forward on PPML, there was quite strong support both in principle and with it as redrafted. In other words, the redrafting we did as shepherds was twofold, was to expand the problem statement to what you saw and to drop that proposed section 3.8. As you heard about the implementation issues, so I thought it was important, so I put a slide in, but I'm not going to dwell on it again since John took care of that. So 2 questions that I thought of. Do we continue to have strong policy support for the policy as written in light of the PPML support shown? And would there be any reason that if, for example, 27-3 was passed, would this be viewed as complementary or mutually exclusive to it and so on? Because that may determine how we assess the policy. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and might as well keep those up there. The microphones are now open for this last recommended draft policy of this meeting, so we need the input on this. This may be the last time you see this proposal. Once again, storming to the mics in person, but the remote is off to the races, so.
Jason Schiller, Google ASOAC. Sorry, it's a long one. Support, but with great disappointment. We need this policy to ensure new POCs don't get created without the victim's knowledge. Today, we only find out about these during annual review of all POCs, which we might not in the future. However, it does not, quote, improve the situation where a POC is unwittingly and unintentionally inserted into who-is, unquote, when the chosen victim is a pre-existing POC or pre-existing org, or a customer identifier is created from a reassigned simple. When the victim is a pre-existing POC or org ID, then they are only discovered by poking at who-is or ARIN online. When the victim is a customer identifier, then it is nearly impossible to discover. I personally have been contacted by others in my org asking why ARIN thinks they are a POC, and I personally have dug through all the resources of one of my orgs only to find there are resources that should belong to a different one of my orgs, and in some cases have been unable to get the assigning org to fix.
Okay, thank you, Jason, for the feedback on that. The rear microphone to start us off in the room.
Hi, this is Iranga Kahangama with the FBI. And the downstream issue, I guess, was something that law enforcement had brought to the community as well in the past. So I do appreciate that some of it is being addressed. So I do support the policy and that I think it's a good step going forward. To some of the comments that were made earlier about the downstream issue, I would also support, I'm not 100% sure how this would be implemented, but some sort of metrics around, today versus a year from now versus further out to see, what percentage of the problem is being solved and if and how other downstream issues need to be addressed. But I do think it's smart in that if it's a burden for ARIN to contact these people who are unwittingly put into the database, then chances are that there's a chance that they'll also be unwittingly contacted by law enforcement and create similar issues. So it's something that we would support in trying to mitigate a problem that we both likely have.
Certainly we could flag that for future policy experience reports if necessary, if adopted.
Sure, thanks.
Thank you. Front microphone.
Owen DeLong, ARIN-AC, speaking only for myself at this point. This was an attempt to resolve, or is an attempt to resolve, a problem that I've observed at a number of organizations, including my most recent former employer in spades. Support the policy as written. My biggest concern with the implementation of the previous policy is the fact that this one doesn't go far enough, and that one removes the safety valve that we have on these resource records pretty much completely without having an alternative in place.
Okay. Thank you. Going to the rear microphone.
Hi. Chris Woodfield, Salesforce and ARIN-AC. I definitely support the policy in principle. I believe I have some concerns around it as written. One of those is similar to the fact that the staff and legal has obviously raised some issues that would have to be resolved. I'll also echo Owen's comment that I believe that this should be complementary to an annual validation because POCs do get stale with fairly common regularity. I also wanted to bring up the potential chicken and egg problem this may create for ISPs where a assigner is in a practice of allocating a sub-assignment at, say, network turn-up time or link turn-up time. If this proposal is in place, there needs to be a period where the block is allocated, the SWIP attempt is made, but that block cannot be routed or should not be routed by the ISP until that POC is validated. So that can create some interesting, that can wind up requiring many ISPs to implement process changes. So to avoid that chicken egg issue.
Okay, thank you for that feedback. Again, this is potentially the last opportunity to discuss this policy, so please approach a microphone. I am rapidly running out of speakers, so we will be closing the microphones if there is a lack of feedback. So, rear microphone.
Kevin Lindbergh, The Wire. I support the proposal as a baby step, and I think the most important part is the understanding from the community. I think that's important that many of the people at the mic have said, this is a baby step, we want it. And I don't want when another proposal comes in to try to deal with this that they go, but you got what you wanted in the first place, why are you asking for more now? So on the record, this is a baby step and it should definitely move forward. The one key issue that I have is I had removed 23 reassignments that we had no idea were part of our thing. We finally found it, they got imported into our ARIN Online. And we couldn't flag them to ARIN that we don't believe that these should be with us. We couldn't delete them ourselves. We had to contact the org in the first place. And we had a good relationship with this org. We knew who they were. We just didn't know they'd done this. We didn't want to get them in trouble. So we didn't want to go through the, send it to ARIN and have ARIN deal with it scenario. We just wanted them to get rid of it and not have added it in the first place. I think at a minimum, and it's more operational than policy, I think at a minimum, if a POC gets added to something, that POC should get notified, so at least they're aware of it. This, just adding stuff without people knowing about it is just unfair. And I don't know a better word for it. Thank you.
Thank you. I will take a comment from Chris Tassel. You'd like to get in queue, but I would urge either remote or in person, if you'd like to comment on this proposal, please approach now because I will close the mics at the end of Chris Tassett.
So I just want to reassure those who are of the view that this isn't a comprehensive solution that I also agree with that, and I never saw it as an end-to-end solution. But I guess in my judgment, the way to tackle this without having to go through 2 or 3 years of consultation was at least to get something that was small and digestible and was a clear first step that, other than having implementation problems, could at least be put into place, except for the implementation challenges that need to be overcome, which can be overcome. We're not told it's impossible to do this, and then we can move on to other enhancements and deal with other parts of the problem. My fear was that if we tried to tackle too much and if we didn't get it quite right, we'd be doing this for a very long time.
Okay. I see that. Thank you, Chris. We have one remote and one in person, and then the microphones are closed.
Jason Schiller, Google ASOAC. Follow on to Kevin, notify the POCs and linked web addresses, please.
Okay. Oh, and the last
Owen
one.
DeLong, ARIN-AC. I agree that the fact that this is not a complete solution is not necessarily a bad thing, and this is a definite good step forward. Fully support this policy. My concern is implementing the previous policy until we have a complete solution to this problem is a step away from goodness.
Okay. All right. With the microphones now being closed, thank Chris
There's-
Tassid for that excellent final policy presentation. What?
There was one last
Oh,
online.
there
I'm
is another.
sorry.
Sorry,
Brian,
Chris.
Brian Jones, agree with the others that any POC getting added should be notified, otherwise support the policy as a beginning step.
Okay. Any other remote participants?
Slack claimed somebody was typing, but then they stopped, so no.
Okay. Thank you, Chris, again for the presentation. And that actually ends our policy presentations after this last vote. So we will now take a poll on this recommended draft policy, ARIN-2017-12, require new POC validation upon reassignment. I would ask all those in favor of the policy proposal as presented to please raise your hand nice and high. It's your last audience participation time of ARIN 41. Just keep it up a little bit just in case. There's a very complex, thank you, Laura. There's a very complex process on this counting. And all those opposed to ARIN 2017-12, please raise your hand nice and high for just a moment. Thank you. We will just await the results. That concludes our policy discussions. I think we just have one more update presentation, then open microphone. Stump the CEO. No more policy till ARIN 42 in lovely Vancouver. Thank you, Michael, as always. All right. On the item of 2017-12, require new POC validation upon reassignments, 77 in the room, 14 remote, 30 in favor, 1 against. This will be provided to the AC, and this concludes our policy for this meeting. John?